Hello, welcome to part 3 of Formulae and Functions in Microsoft Excel 2007. Today we are going to be talking about cell referencing. As all of us know, each cell in a Microsoft spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, has got its own unique address, which is a combination of the column letter and the row number. For example, the cell that I'm highlighting in this particular spreadsheet is Amar's English marks. This is essentially a spreadsheet which contains marks obtained by 5 different students in 4 different subjects, and each cell is a combination of the student and the particular subject. So Amar's English is in this cell, Amar's maths marks are in this cell, science marks here, and so on. But apart from the content of the cell itself has got a unique address, which is in this case column B and row 3. So this cell has got a unique address called B3, and that's what is shown in the name box of the cell. Similarly, the maths marks of Amar are placed in a cell whose address is C3 because it's in the intersection of C column and row number 3, and so on and so forth. So each of the cells in spreadsheet have got a unique cell address. Now, how does this come into picture in a formula? As we saw earlier, formulae can be written by using simple numbers as operands to mathematical operators, or instead of putting literal numbers in place, we could refer to the contents of another spreadsheet cell to write a formula or a function. To refer to a number which is in another cell in the spreadsheet, we put the cell address. And the cell address can be put inside a formula in 3 different ways. 3 different ways we can refer to the source data that's going to be used in the formula. These 3 different ways are relative reference, absolute reference, and mixed reference. In this video, we will focus on relative reference, and we will talk about the other 2 referencing techniques in the subsequent video. So let's talk about and find out more about relative reference. Relative referencing is a technique by using which, suppose you put a cell reference in a particular formula, and when you copy that formula and paste it in another cell, the cell reference that you had put in the formula in the original formula is going to change as you paste it to another cell. Let's see this through an example to get clarity of what we mean here. Let's take the spreadsheet that we looked at a few minutes back, where we have marks of different students in different subjects. Let us say we want to calculate the total marks a student has scored across multiple subjects. So we have seen it in the earlier video how to do that. Let's quickly redo that for the first student here. So let's go back to the spreadsheet. I want to see the total marks that Amar has scored over all the 4 subjects. So we put an equal sign for the formula and then select the 4 cells whose contents we want to sum up, and we intersperse them with the plus operator, and we got the total marks that Amar has scored. Let's go back and look at our instructions to see what's the next step. So once we have found out the total for the first student, who was Amar in our case, let's write, okay, we did the second step as well, which is to write the formula to add the individual subject marks to find the total mark. Now we want to do this for the rest of the students, and we want to copy paste the formula that we wrote for the first student. So the way to do copy paste, as we had seen it in the earlier video, is to use the copy button in the clipboard group in the home tab. So let's use the copy button here, and we could either press enter key here, or we can do a paste here. Let me do an enter key on this cell. So now what we have done is to copy the formula that we wrote for Amar onto Akbar. Now let's just examine the content, what is inside this formula and what all does it add up. So, so when we wrote the formula for Amar, we had just chosen his 4 subject marks and we just copied it and pasted it here. So so we would expect the same 4 numbers would get added here and it would wrongly point Amar's total as Akbar's total. But Microsoft Excel is intelligent enough to change the reference of this total to pick the corresponding cells on this row, right? So instead of taking B3, C3, D3, and E3 as was the Amar's case, when we pasted the formula onto Akbar, since it's a formula on row number 4, the references to B3, C3, D3, E3 have automatically been changed to B4, C4, D4, and E4, which are Akbar's marks. So this kind of changing of the referred cells when you copy the formula from one cell to another cell is known as relative referencing. Let's do that one more time. I'm going to copy the um, formula from Akbar onto Abdullah, and again we see that the references have changed to row number 5 instead of row number 4, which is Akbar's. And let's do it 2 more times to make sure the rest of the 2 students also are marked with their appropriate marks. Total marks are calculated against their names. So once again we see that the formula content has appropriately been modified to reflect the relative cells corresponding to the row on which we are trying to obtain the total. The same thing happens with column-wise total also. So let's say instead of total, I want to find out what is the average marks that students have obtained in each subject. So taking English, there are 5 students and these are the marks that those students have got. And if I need to find out the average of this, first I need to sum them up and then I need to divide it by 5. So I just write the formula to sum them up. And we want to divide the whole sum by 5. So let me use the parenthesis and then divide it by 5. And we get the average marks in English is 74.2. So if I want to carry it over to the remaining 3 subjects and even to the overall total, what's the overall average total that all these 5 students have got, what I could do is copy this formula and then when I paste it here, instead of this cell was taking an average of all the 5 marks in English of all the 5 students. Now if you refer to this formula, which we just did a copy paste of the average formula that we wrote for English, you can see that instead of referring to column B, it has referred to all the 5 student marks in column C, which is the maths marks that they have scored. So this way you can see that Excel is intelligent enough when you use the relative referencing, be it across different columns or different rows. It's going to just make sure that appropriate values are substituted or appropriate references are substituted as you copy the formula from one cell onto another. So I'm just completing the process for all the 4 subjects and also the total marks. So 502 is the average total that all these students have scored, all the 5 students have scored. And you could see that the formula has been appropriately modified to make references to appropriate columns. Earlier, when we were doing the sum of each student, the reference was changed from row to row. So it was row number 3 here, it was row number 4, row number 5, and so on. Whereas when we do this, it is column to column. It is column B, column C, column D. That's the way the references have changed. So we completed the instructions here. So what we understood was that Excel has automatically adjusted the cell addresses in the formula when you copy the formula from one cell to another. So when we had B3, B4, B5, B6, B7 in the first formula, it has, when we pasted it, it automatically changed it to C3, C4, C5, C6, and C7. So this automatic changing of the reference is called relative referencing. Thank you for watching, and in the next video we will explore absolute reference and mixed reference.